Great. So I'm here to give you 5 strategies for doing nuclear stories and to be an evangelist for the Freedom of Information Act.
Yes.
Because that law is not like the White Sands Missile Range, which doesn't allow non-U.S. citizens even in the door. The law says any person, and that means you. So use it or lose it. So where I'm coming from, the National Security Archive, non-government, no government money, lives on foundation grants and publication revenues, 70,000 Freedom of Information requests in about 35 years, 800 ebooks of documents, previously secret documents published on the web, 80 different lawsuits against the United States government to force open documents and save records. We saved Jared Kushner's WhatsApp messages at the end of the Trump administration. And we saved Ronald Reagan's email records from the 1980s. We've had to sue every president. All right, that's just where I'm coming from. And I've got 5 strategies, and it's pretty straightforward. 1, the human factor. 2, follow the fallout. 3, anniversaries. 4, declassified is news. And 5, you've heard it before, empathy. For asking your question of the other. So the human factor. Right here in this town, 30 years ago, this year, an incredible reporter named Eileen Wilson put human faces on one of the worst crimes the United States government ever committed, which was injecting plutonium into people without their consent. She was the neighborhood's reporter who was chasing some nuclear waste dump at Kirtland Air Force Base, and in a footnote, it mentioned there's also residues here from the plutonium injections experiments that involved 18 people. It was in a footnote to a declassified document. And she takes it to her city editor. You know editors. As Mencken said, the relationship of the editor to the writer is that of the knife to the throat, right? Editor said, Eileen, you're a neighborhoods reporter. You're not supposed to be chasing plutonium injection experiments. What are you doing? 5 years later, she had chased down 5 of the 18 and put a human face on them. In one of the other footnotes, it said the Department of Energy sent a letter to a doctor of one of those injected who lived in a tiny town called Italy, Texas. Italy. I don't even know where Italy, Texas is. But Eileen Wilson picked up the phone and called town hall. All she knew was African-American guy, railroad porter, had a leg amputated. Know anybody like that? Town hall people said, yeah, that was Elmer Allen, but he died last year. She goes, oh, damn, I missed it. But she found the widow, the family, and then she could tell his story and the suffering over the 40 years after the plutonium injections. He was one of the 5. She goes public, November 1993, front page of the afternoon newspaper here in Albuquerque. It's the Tribune. It doesn't exist anymore. It was a Scripps Howard paper. It's out of business. Right? The morning paper ignored her for 3 weeks. Ever had that experience? Right? AP story is the only thing that appeared in the New York Times. But an aide named Bob Alvarez, who's a hero in many respects on matters nuclear, and Jay knows him, worked for the new Secretary of Energy, Hazel O'Leary. And Bob Alvarez takes the Albuquerque Tribune story to Hazel O'Leary, the new Secretary, and she reads this and is horrified, holds a press conference and says, we're going to release everything about the plutonium experiments, and by the way, we're going to release everything on nuclear testing, and by the way, I'm going to talk to my Russian colleagues and see if we can get them to release their stuff on nuclear testing. You had this fundamental turning point in openness and accountability on nuclear matters because an afternoon reporter, neighborhoods reporter for the Albuquerque Tribune chased down the human faces and put the faces on the story and on the suffering. So Eileen Wilson won the Pulitzer Prize the next year.
Good.
Just inspiration, the human factor. Second, follow the fallout. intimately connected. Because by fallout, I don't just mean what Tina and the Tularosa downwinders were talking about yesterday or 2 days ago at the Trinity test. Because there's so much to this story. In many respects, doctors estimate there's been an exponential increase in thyroid cancers globally because of nuclear testing by all of the nuclear states. They can't get a precise handle on it because the causal factors are so complex. But look, all of us are downwinders in that sense. And think about that and think about the interconnections. Think about this. The first outsiders who detected the Trinity test, the Eastman Kodak Photography Company. Why? Because fallout from the Trinity test got to Indiana, the Wabash River, irrigated some farms where corn was growing for the cellulose that Eastman Kodak used to wrap its film canisters. Corn husks had radiation, exposed the film and spoiled the film. Eastman Kodak went livid. Ultimately, they threatened to sue the Atomic Energy Commission. If they didn't, they're going to ruin our business. Clouds from Nevada test site got as far as Rochester, New York. Think about that, and think about the Americans who live between Las Vegas and Rochester, right? Eastman Kodak got a settlement, sealed settlement, where the Atomic Energy Commission would give Kodak notice of a test and an estimated map, given wind and meteorological conditions, of where the fallout might be, so they could adjust production at their biggest plant in Rochester, New York, or their film, not to lose their film. Those maps are now declassified. You can track the fallout. It's by 1950, you had pediatricians in St. Louis picking up elevated strontium levels in baby teeth from those tests. Those physicians turned into Physicians for Social Responsibility and then International Physicians Against Nuclear War. And this is where following the fallout can take you. We're all downwinders. It's an evergreen story. It's not just fallout. It's the unsolved problems of nuclear waste, survivors of testing and bombing. It's the 24,000 years half-life of plutonium that Sig Hecker told us about. So how do you write about all this? Strategy number 3, anniversaries. It's amazing. Editors need hooks, news hooks. The public needs news hooks. What do you tie this to? How can you raise to people's attention these life and death, existential dread? Who wants to face that, right? Well, anniversaries really work. July 16th, the Trinity test, the 78th anniversary of the Trinity test. That's a hook. That's an interesting way to get a story into the press or do a couple of interviews with the likes of Sig Hecker or Jay, right? Think about Hiroshima and Nagasaki anniversaries in August. Every year, we at the National Security Archive publish the latest stuff we've gotten declassified about the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 2 years ago, we actually got translations of the magic intercepts of the internal conversations of the emperor in Japan discussing the impact of the fire bombings. They killed a lot more people than the nuclear bombings. The Soviet entry into the war. Oh my God, they were more scared of that, taking away the whole north of Japan. Kuril Islands are still an issue. The nuclear factor in that. What you can do is read these documents and then make a decision for yourself. That's our whole goal in life at the National Security Archive, is give you the evidence. It's not that these documents are truth. They are evidence. And your job is to triangulate that against other evidence. Just the end of last year, 60th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and Svetlana and many others really advanced the story on how dangerous that really was. It made headlines all over the world because anniversaries are a hook. This fall is the 40th anniversary of the Able Archer nuclear war scare of 1983. Almost as dangerous as the missile crisis, but didn't get any headlines at the time, only much later. It's also the 40th anniversary of when Allen's colleagues published the first nuclear winter scientific studies that have been more than borne out ever since. So make your own list of anniversaries, and if I could task the atomic reporters to do one huge service for us in the future of this network, create a calendar of the atomic anniversaries that would be news hooks for those of us who want to cover these issues and get the stories out. So that's
Just add another anniversary. Los Alamos turns 80 this year
There you go.
because it was created for the Manhattan Project.
Fantastic.
So that's a huge. Nobody,
And nobody's really writing.
nobody in the town even wants to speak about it. So
That is a great story. So, strategy number 4, declassified is news, which means if the government was keeping it secret from you and now you have it, wow, that's news. Why was it secret? What was so sensitive about it? How did we get it now? What's the headline? I mean, my favorite of all these, we finally got, after years of appeals and negotiations, the Freedom of Information request, we finally got the nuclear war plan for 1959. Gosh, now, why would that be news? It wasn't even an anniversary, right? Well, it made the front page of the New York Times, made the evening news. And why? Because it showed how they had built the nuclear war plan. It had been so top secret, so hermetically sealed inside the nuclear vaults, if you will, of the time. They had built it in secret in Omaha, Nebraska, joint staff targeting staff. Every time the intelligence community would come in and find a new airfield in the Warsaw Pact, or China, or Yugoslavia, a new oil supply, an oil storage site, a new munitions factory, or even steel factory, they'd send it to the targeting staff, and they would add a new bomb to put on it. The result? East Berlin in 1959, if we'd had nuclear war, was on the receiving end of 91 nuclear weapons. Just, was there any adult supervision to this planning process? Aren't there a bunch of Americans and Brits and allies in a place called West Berlin? What happens to West Berlin when you put 91 bombs on East Berlin? But it was just accreted targeting. And that's what happened over the years. You don't have to dig these documents. We've dug out a lot of these documents, the planning. Here's the casualty estimates. Here's the target list declassified for the first time. Go in there and take a look. Hope you're as horrified as I was. You will also see news in there that maybe we didn't see. We wrote our own headlines, but and then file your own requests. Declassified documents made news. And Eileen Wilson did a bunch of requests. Only 1 or 2 of them really came back with anything she could use for that series, but they led her to the human factor and the front page and the Pulitzer Prize. So use it. It may take years, and I don't want to discourage you. Some of our requests that resulted in these publications took 20 years to fight loose from the nuclear bureaucracy. Jay knows what I'm talking about. But the key to that, and you can flip to the next page if you will, Larry, the key to that, how to use the Freedom of Information Act, this book is on our website. It'll tell you everything you need to know. And by the way, we can send you this as a live PDF, so you have all these links, and I think that's one of the things we'll do after the session. But this, how to do it for everyone, and then during COVID, we built a database of every federal Freedom of Information office, what it had done during COVID, who was active, is it live, is it Memorex, is it email, can you reach anybody by phone, are there human beings? And we update it about every month, because we have a full-time person who just tracks how government agencies receive and process and track our own. So this is where to send it, so you actually get it to the right person. The United States government, despite the Congress telling the agencies in 2016 there should be a single portal for you to file your FOIA request that would then direct it to the right place, doesn't have it, hasn't spent the money. The requirement's still in law, they haven't obeyed it, so this is the next best thing. So the key, I would say the key piece of all this is what Hazel O'Leary created as a result of Eileen Wilson's work, this open net. It's really useful to search. It has hundreds of thousands of records in there. Nuclear waste covers the whole map. But you can find interesting tidbits if you go. This one is terrific on the history of nuclear weapons, that kind of targeting stuff I'm talking about. These are the internal histories written by the Air Force on how they were planning to use them, how they were planning to deliver them, etc. And this one, Valeria, can you click on Atomic Archive? The this third one right there. I don't know if it can go live. Anyway, I was just looking at this one the other day because it's a terrific resource on Trinity. Scroll down just a little bit. Click on Media Gallery. It has all these incredible photos, and then click on Maps. And scroll down one more. And right here, there you go. You were there. This is where you were. If you came on the Trinity test site, that. Oh, no, that's good. That's good. That's where you were. That's the fallout that Tina and others were talking about. By the luck of the wind, that it was from the southwest blowing northeast, it just covered the village where Bernice, who you probably met on the bus, where she was born 2 weeks before that, right? It covered that little village. If the wind had come the other way, what would have been covered? Albuquerque. Follow the fallout. File requests. Use some of these resources. They're there to show to an editor, here's the issue. We missed irradiating 100,000 people in Albuquerque by the shift of the wind. Right? So, final point of the 5 strategies, empathy, always ask, what were they thinking? Svetlana said it, other people have said it. The key to both good nuclear policy and to good nuclear stories is asking that question. What are they thinking? What were they thinking? I won an Emmy Award for asking a simple question. What were the Chinese thinking when Nixon and Kissinger showed up on the great opening to China that Kissinger has dined off of for the remainder of his career, right? We got the transcripts loose of the Nixon-Kissinger meetings with Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai. We published, created a sensation, front page of the New York Review of Books, all this kind of stuff. So the Chinese Foreign Ministry invited us to Beijing. We give a talk, presentation, and copies of all the documents. They're fascinating because these meetings with Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai are still top secret in China. They're getting to read what their own leaders had to say. Wow, what a window in on an authoritarian state, right? It was thrilling to them. They said, well, you know, this is a great story you're telling here. Well, why don't you come with us across the street to the Diplomatic Academy, which is where they train their ambassadors. Right? Here's our case study of that diplomacy. The title of the case study, we had a great Chinese historian with us, Chen Jin. He said, oh, wow. It's called Playing the American Card. Playing the American card. Remember, our phrase in America is, oh, we played the China card. We played the China card against Moscow. Well, their version is, we played the American card. And then in that case study, they included these 4 marshals who were hiding from the Red Guards, but sent Mao a report. China was at war with the Soviet Union in January 1969. They were having border clashes and fights, people getting killed, right? So the 4 marshals say to Mao, you know, you got to bring in the far barbarians, the Americans, against the near barbarians, the Soviets. Got to bring the far barbarians, the near barbarians. And the case study goes on to even down to how many steps should Richard Nixon have to take when he gets off the airplane and before he shakes Zhou Enlai's hand so that he looks most like one of those barbarian chieftains who used to come paying tribute to the emperor. This is the Chinese view of this brilliant diplomatic feat by Nixon and Kissinger. And then you look, well, who won? Which party is still in power? Washington, one for Moscow, maybe one for London if the Brits got involved, right? And that was enough to keep us not attacking China. And they're now moving to a 200 to 300 deliverable warhead posture. And the Defense Department thinks they're moving to a 1,500 warhead posture. Why? Why are you doing that? What is that about? Does it have anything to do with what we're doing on missile defenses, or on our own modernization that you've heard so much about, or our own precision-guided munitions that can take out Xi in his dacha at the ocean when they're meeting with the rest of the Politburo? How much hinges for the Chinese on what their neighbors are doing, Pakistan and India, or the Koreas? You know, the temptation for Korea and Japan to get into the nuclear, North Korea, China. I mean, what is driving, or does China have what we have? A nice military industrial complex that involves a ton of jobs and a lot of political underpinnings for the establishment, for the Communist Party. So, and then how much is about just, you heard Sig Hecker say the North Korean minister said to him, "We can do anything you can do." I think we underestimate how much of a motive for other countries is just respect, just legitimacy, just we can do anything that you can do. What is it? So what are they thinking? Those are key issues. So those are my 5 strategies. I'd love to hear your questions about the Freedom of Information Act and use these links. And I keep talking. Thanks.
I'd have to look back at my notes. Is it right?
Yeah.
I think you said something like you've had something like 70 lawsuits, and that it can drag on to up to 20 years. I just wanted to hear a bit more about your relationship with attorneys, because I'm for the first time working with attorneys for a pro bono public records request, and for most journalists, it's just prohibitively expensive unless you get an attorney to work for you for free. So I'm just wondering, you get staff attorneys, do you work for law clinics, do you get big law to do pro bono work for you?
All the above.
Yeah.
We have one staff attorney who is actually a fellow from Howard University Law School. We're trying to build a diversity pipeline into open government legal work. But almost all our cases are managed by pro bono law firms.
Yeah.
And I have to say, they love it because in their work lives, they're basically corporations dueling over contracts.
Right.
Yeah, it's boring, and they can't talk about it at cocktail parties because it's confidential client information.
Right.
But hey, if you're representing the National Security Archive to sue the Central Intelligence Agency, now that's fun.
Right.
And so they have a blast, and it's good training for them, and sometimes they even win fees. There are also great law clinics. I think every law school should have some kind of public representation clinic in which doing a Freedom of Information case is a pretty straightforward legal matter.
Right.
The main problem is getting over the delay and just getting into court so a judge will set a schedule so they start processing. Svetlana won a Freedom of Information case where she's still getting every 6 weeks or so another 300 pages from this whole batch of boxes that's been going on for 3 years. But let me tell you, you build up a critical mass of evidence over time. So law schools and universities usually have clinics, usually will representing poor people or public defender kind of work. Law firms, if you can get to them, always a good idea. Don't go to the law firm that represents the local big media company because they're used to fees.
You need fees. Sorry.
Being paid by the news, like the Washington.
Okay, yeah.
The firm that represents the Washington Post in its First Amendment work doesn't do pro bono work for people like us. Check.
I really like your one point of follow all out. So I want everybody here to know that the most cancer fatalities from atmospheric testing are yet to come. And specifically, that's because carbon-14, which is a fission product, unlike most other fission products, has a very long half-life. And I'm not the expert on that. Speak to Arjun Makhajani at the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research, but I'll repeat my point. The most cancer fatalities are yet to come. Okay, I got that out of the way. Now I want to talk shop, and I'm not worthy. You've got 80 FOIA lawsuits. I got 3. On my current FOIA lawsuit, the FOIA amendments of 1996, when a document is a frequently requested document, and it only takes 3 requesters, but the agency is supposed to then stick it in an eFOIA reading room. So I want to know if you've done that.
Frequently requested documents. This is Energy Department's
Yes.
reading room, right? This one too at the Pentagon, right?
Yeah.
This one Defense Intelligence Agency.
Um,
It's a requirement more audit in the breach than the observance.
Yeah. And they're fighting on us. And we filed a FOIA for an annual document. And we have got them to post past ones, but we're trying to get them to post future annual documents because they always get 3 requests. Do you have any experience with that?
Yes, especially key is finding the human being in the Freedom of Information shop who feeds the reading room. We know the one at State Department very well, so we can talk to her about, well, what's upcoming, why hasn't stuff that was released 8 months ago yet appeared. A lot of slowdowns because of COVID, but there's, I mean, that human connection, to the extent you can find it, is huge.
Okay.
And second, nobody has ever sued any of the agencies, as far as I know, for not complying with the frequently requested.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah, you got to do it.
Anyway, we'll talk.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Listen.
Jack was first.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Tom. This is great. I'm curious just more, before you get to the lawsuit phase, how you deal with more routine denials, delays. I mean, the State Department, as you mentioned, is like notorious for never responding to things. Different parts of the Pentagon will take years, up to like 5 years. Curious how you deal with that, or if it's always, you go to a lawsuit fairly quickly, or sort of what your threshold is for that. And then if you can just talk more practically about the utility of reading rooms. I know you went into it a little bit, but like what ring of the Pentagon is it in? How do I go? Just curious about the very basics of that.
Yeah, on the threshold, we filed 70,000 requests and we've only sued over about 80. So we have very high threshold before we'll go to court, because it's a major expense of our staff time, of our pro bono goodwill. It has to be an issue of documents that would be on the front page news if we got them released, or an issue of a systematic barrier to access that affects a lot of other people, not just us. And we have an internal calculation. Do we have the staffing to be able to support this lawsuit? And do we have the pro bono outside legal expertise to do it? So there's those 4 criteria will narrow your scope. On dealing with the normal bureaucracy, the key to making the Freedom of Information process work is for you, the requester, to know more about the document you're requesting than the person inside the government who's going to process your request. So, for example, the ideal request, the reason Eileen Wilson could get stuff on those 18 is that she found references in a footnote to a letter, and then she could ask for the letter. For us, a State Department cable, if you look at, say, WikiLeaks, WikiCables, right? People with clearances aren't supposed to do that. Everybody does, because the whole world can see them. Cables often have a little line in there called REFTEL, which means referenced telegram, which means the cable to which this is responding or to which this is expanding. So we take that cable number that's very precise. In a given year, there's only one cable that has that number in the State Department database. We just ask for that number. Don't even say what we think it's about. Just ask for that number. Ideal requests at a presidential library. You go to a presidential library, you'll find withdrawal sheets where an archivist has had to pull the still classified contents of a file, but they put in a little sheet saying, we pulled this. Well, you take that sheet, you can submit that as a Freedom of Information, or it's called mandatory declassification review. MDR is a problem. It's White Sands Missile Range. Non-citizens can't do it. Freedom of Information is open to everyone. Withdrawal sheet specifies the document, the file, the box, the location. Those are the best requests because they're rifle shots, not cannons, not blunderbusses. So by knowing more going in on our request, we were able to follow up with the Freedom of Information officers and say, look, what happened to that? It's a specific cable with a cable number. Why is it taking you guys so long? And we can get some results back. In every agency, there are different tricks of the trade. We put a bunch of them into that book up there. We have draft appeal letters, draft FOIA request letters, draft language to use when you're sort of threatening to court, etc. So there are groups out there, and particularly there's a group called Judicial Watch, which really went after Obama and others. They have a standard. They file a lawsuit after 20 working days after they haven't gotten a substantive answer. And they have really clogged up the courts, I think, for every other Freedom of Information requester. And they've really made a lot of government officials mad. And it's slowed down things for everybody. So the knee-jerk litigation is a zero-sum game, and it's a real problem. But if you don't go to court, then you're just speaking softly. You're not doing the full Theodore Roosevelt treatment where you speak softly and carry a big stick. That's how you get results. Is that helpful?
Yeah, and in your kind of work, this is sort of off top, but do you get sued at all? Do you guys get sued at all?
We don't get sued at all because it's government documents, so they're not copyrighted. If the government has sovereign immunity, so if the document says a nasty thing about, Kadyrov, the Chechen leader, well, that was the State Department saying that. That wasn't us. So we've not been sued. We did find out that the Federal Bureau of Investigation had opened a file on us because of how effective we were in filing freedom of information requests and surveilled us all the way up through at least 2004. So anyway, it's an honor in a certain way. We also, Oliver North, during the Iran-Contra affair, wrote in his notebook he was going to call the Ford Foundation to cut off our grants. We have that page of his notebook framed on our office wall. It's like being on Nixon's enemies list. Wow, that means you really got somewhere, right? And what was a friend of mine said, who's been a long-time investigator, he said, I don't want to file for my Federal Bureau of Investigation file. What if there's not much there? Right.